we're not going to be doing much today. I'm just going to need you to take a look at these pictures and tell me how they make you feel. You are a sick man. Today, we are going to be talking about your thoughts on emulation. It's illegal. No, it isn't. You know what you're doing to me is extremely illegal. People like you aren't needed in this world. If you really wanted me dead, you would have killed me already. Holy shit. Do you have any idea what I do with people like you? Good evening and... God damn it, Eric! Good evening and welcome to Channel 12.5 News. I'm your host, Hank R. Man. Let's get right into tonight's stories. The examination of the crime scene for Dr. Edward Chapp's alleged kidnapping has concluded. Officers are still unable to pinpoint where he was allegedly taken, but a few pieces of evidence were found. First being this slip of paper addressed to Chapp's secretary lying in the parking lot of the therapist's office. Police say this could be indicative of the patient's mental state. In addition, a
Mental
document about
state.
the effects of
Okay,
brain
then.
beans on the human brain was open on his laptop. Why are we showing this? And you wonder why we get put on a half channel. If this evidence rings a bell for anyone viewing tonight's broadcast, we once again urge you to please contact the local authorities through the number on your screen as soon as possible. With that said though, let's now kick it over to Darcy for a more lighthearted story. Thanks, Hank. I'm here on someone's back porch without their permission trying to... You're here! What's wrong? Did you get kidnapped or something? What the hell is this, huh? Couldn't you have figured that out yourself? You'd think a therapist would know how to read. Who knew you were stupid enough to leave incriminating documents in the same room as me? A whole box of them, in fact. Yeah. That is pretty stupid, isn't it? Not only are you targeting proponents of emulation, but you're also targeting fan game creators, all while fabricating their deaths? You are a funny guy, you know that? I don't see anything funny about this. I just thought it would be amusing if you read through all those documents. Why the hell else would I hide the box above two loose boards in the ceiling other than wanting you to find it? It's honestly embarrassing how long it took you. It doesn't matter how long it took me. You're kidnapping people and holding them captive just for making a game. We all know it's not that simple. Stop sugarcoating it. You need to know that your actions have consequences, just like with all of these other people. Besides, we haven't even spoken about fan games yet. We didn't get to that in our stupid little sessions, but I guess it's clear where your intentions lie. So where are all these other people you've taken? What are you doing to them? Are they even alive? Whoa, slow down there, Shed Boy. That's for me to know and for you to be angry about. Are you kidding me? Shed Boy? Anyways, I think I'm gonna head out. Here's your daily saltine. Also, why don't you take a shower? It smells like shit in here.
Fan games. There's a lot of them, especially when we're talking about Nintendo, and obviously if you're even the slightest bit involved within the Nintendo sphere, you've heard about how they deal with them. In fact, there's so much infamy surrounding Nintendo fan games that whenever you mention it, you're sure to have at least one person spew out their hive mind opinion about the subject.
Nintendo hates their fans. They're always sicking their lawyers on people that make games purely out of love for their franchises. I honestly cannot think of a single corporation on this planet that has done something worse than that. So, does that mean you don't want pepperoni on your pizza?
It's not that this isn't true to an extent, because it definitely is, but it's honestly far more complicated than you would think. What if I told you that Nintendo only takes down certain fan games and essentially ignores the others? That's right, the games that most people think are flying under the radar are actually, at least from what most people have gathered, not a problem to Nintendo. Let me explain. DMCA, or the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, is a law created back in the Stone Age of the Internet, 1998. Basically, in the context of digital media, it means that copyright holders reserve the right to send a legal cease and desist order to anyone infringing on their copyrighted material, whether that be video, music, writing, or games. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Besides, let's be honest, how many people actually seem to really care about digital property laws anyway? This is obviously relevant to fan games, as there have been numerous instances of public outrage due to a really promising fan game getting shut down by the evil corporate overlords. And sure, it makes complete sense to be a little angry that something you were excited to play gets eviscerated. The same has happened to me plenty of times. However, I think it's important to understand why these specific games get shut down, and no, it's not just because they're infringing on copyright. There are actually 3 different criteria I've discovered that seem to put a fan game at the highest risk of a DMCA takedown. Fulfilling any of these usually, but not always, guarantees a nice little letter from the offices at Nintendo. Before I start though, keep in mind that none of these criteria apply to the Pokemon franchise, as any takedowns of those games are handled by the Pokemon Company, which is a completely different breed of whack job corporation. So, the first criteria available to piss off Nintendo is if the fan game you are creating is a remake of an already existing Nintendo game. One of the most notable examples of this is AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake. As subtle as that title is, Nintendo caught on pretty quickly, issuing the takedown less than a month after its release. A year after that, Samus Returns releases for the 3DS, which was also a remake of Metroid 2. You can probably see the reasoning here. As crazy as it sounds, their thought process assumed that AM2R would hinder the sales of Samus Returns. Honestly, in this case, it possibly could have, considering that AM2R is widely regarded as the better remake of the two in most aspects, but that's besides the point. Why is it besides the point? Well, because they obviously don't take remakes down just because they're making their own at the same time. They might remake that game in 20 years, and God forbid that we enjoy an alternative beforehand. Back in 2015, a fan remade the first level of Super Mario 64 from the ground up as a demonstration for their custom character controller in the Unity engine. They published a YouTube video showing this off. Shortly after the video was released, particularly when it started gaining mass media attention, an attorney contacted the creator on behalf of Nintendo and casted their magic annoying legal word spell to scare them away. It worked, obviously, and that was that. I gave this example on top of the other because, well, Nintendo never actually remade Super Mario 64 after this was taken down, unless they were already planning this, or they were trying to protect sales of the DS remake, which is on a discontinued console that they can't really profit off of anymore. I mean, if you really wanted to be completely fair, this was shortly before that remake released on the Wii U Virtual Console, but like, come on.
I mean, what are the shareholders gonna think when they see that someone's programming exercise has Mario in it? Oh god, oh f***. This can't be happening. Tell Janet to call the attorney right now!
Granted, you can still find both of these games in plenty of places across the internet if you just look, but for legal reasons I am only acknowledging this, not encouraging it. AM2R was actually picked back up by fans of the game, and since then has received multiple updates bringing bug fixes, improvements, and even a couple new game modes. As you may have guessed though, the Super Mario 64 remake never saw any further progress after its initial takedown, but there are plenty of other remakes of the game out there started, but usually never finished, by countless fans.
Nintendo, hire this man now.
The next cardinal sin that will summon the DMCA overlords is probably the most obvious, and that is monetization. I don't think many people actually disagree with the reasoning behind this one. If you're directly profiting off the use of an intellectual property that you don't own, it's a bit more understandable. However, you're still going to have those people that only think fan game takedown bad and still get pissed anyway. Learn to think with a little nuance, people. Anyways, this monetization criteria is the reason for one of the biggest DMCA takedowns in Nintendo history. Back in 2020, GameJolt, a popular indie game hosting site, received a DMCA takedown notice from Nintendo citing 379 Nintendo fan games that were to be taken down immediately. Why? Well, GameJolt has a feature in which the developers receive a small fraction of the ad revenue generated from their game's page. And when I say small fraction, I really mean a small fraction. Most developers report making $1 to $2 per year from these pages. Regardless, revenue is revenue, and Nintendo did not like that people were able to buy a 2-liter from the gas station once a year with their prosperous earnings. Other fan game creators have received takedown notices due to either having ads on the site hosting the download or asking for donations via something like PayPal or Patreon to aid in development. If you ask me, applying any form of monetization to any fan game, regardless of if it's Nintendo or not, is just a bad idea from the start. If you can't afford to make a game and need financial assistance from people wanting to see the game developed, then just don't make a fan game. Make something original and you have all the right in the world to ask for as much money as you want. That statement begs the big question though. Why do people choose to make fan games over their own original work? Well, the obvious answer is that fan games are created out of love for the franchises they are based on. People simply like to have more of what they enjoy. It allows them to stay in their comfort zone, both in the case of developers and players. Developers get to work with and refine familiar concepts, artwork, and mechanics, while the players get to experience them. Though, even under this umbrella, they always have the right to simply take heavy inspiration from these titles while still creating their own original properties instead, which is why I do think it's worth acknowledging that in most cases, these games wouldn't be getting nearly as much attention if they didn't include Nintendo's intellectual properties. That may seem like a given, but I also feel like it's something that not many people talk or even think about in the context of this conversation. At any rate, I want to make it clear that this is not meant to discredit these creators in any way. There have been plenty of fan games that actually end up being better than most of the official releases. After all, one of the most common motivations for making these games is succeeding where the actual developers failed. There is a company that is completely in support of literally just hiring people willing to do exactly that, and I'm sure you can guess who, but just hold on, we're getting there. The final characteristic of a fan game that makes Nintendo shit their diapers is if you happen to depict any of their properties in an inappropriate manner. So if you were thinking of making a Wario sex game, you're pretty much out of luck. Obviously, it's not just sexual content that counts as inappropriate though. For example, any games that depict gruesome violence or vulgar language involving Nintendo IPs have been known to receive takedowns almost immediately. I'm sure many of us remember those Mario Flash games from back in the day where he and many other Mario characters committed countless violent acts against others. You know, the good old days. That being said, it is worth mentioning that this final criteria isn't nearly as reliable as the first two in whether or not your game is going to be taken down. More often than not, Nintendo doesn't bother with these, but it was still common enough to bring up. However, as with all things, there are a couple exceptions to those first two criteria, meaning games outside the bounds of them were taken down anyway, with one of the most notable cases being The Legend of Zelda: The Missing Link, an entirely original ROM hack created to bridge the gap in story between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Mere months after its release, Nintendo did its thing and the missing link suffered the same fate as many others, but something is different about this fan game in specific that makes the takedown even more confusing. As I already mentioned, the missing link is a ROM hack of Ocarina of Time. For those who aren't familiar, ROM hacks are essentially modified copies of the original game that can range from changing a few lines of text to creating an entirely new game. This is another way of creating fan games, which is usually more accessible than building your own from the ground up, and makes it even less likely that Nintendo will come for your head. But as you can see here, your odds will never be zero.
So you're telling me you paid the lawyers that much to take down a measly ROM hack? Look, man, that part isn't important. Just cut me a little slack here. I was really drunk. Unbelievable! Did you get a look at his face, though?
Like when I handed him the cease and desist letter?
Yeah, he started crying. No way!
As far as anyone knows, ROM hacks are entirely legal to create and distribute as long as you do two things. First, don't profit off of them, if that wasn't already obvious, and second, make sure you only distribute the patch of the ROM and not the ROM itself, the ROM being the copy of the actual game. Distributing any portion of that yourself is entirely illegal, no gray area there. By distributing the patch and the patch only, you're giving people the ability to modify their own, presumably legally obtained copy of the game with your patch when they apply it to their ROM. So why does Nintendo get to issue takedowns on these anyway? Well, the short answer is that they have more money than you. Even though you are technically within your legal right to create and release these patches, as far as I can tell at least, Nintendo knows that you can't afford the avalanche of legal fees that will come your way if you try to fight them in court about it. That may sound extremely scummy. That's because it is. For the most part, it seems like they ignore ROM hacks, but I guess if they don't like one enough, they can use their mountainous legal budget to get it to go away one way or another. But alas, all of their efforts are in vain regardless. As soon as that patch hits the World Wide Web, there is absolutely no possible way it's disappearing forever. For example, you can still find the missing link with a simple Google search, and I can tell you this because it's legal. All Nintendo can really do is prevent the original creator from hosting, supporting, or developing the game any further, and even that's only through financial scare tactics. Another pretty big exception to the remake criteria comes with Super Mario Bros. X. However, this time it's the reverse. It has never been officially shut down and has existed for over a decade. This fan game is actually a powerful engine used to create custom Mario levels and games, or at this point any type of platformer. Since its release in 2009, it has only had one run-in with Nintendo because someone was dumb enough to use the domain name supermariobrothers.org for the game and put ads on the site. Long story short, Nintendo essentially took the domain and told them to stop putting ads on the site, and that was the end of it. A cease and desist was involved, but it seemed to only really apply to the website itself, which was also hosting numerous other Mario-related things at that time. The game still receives support and updates to this day, though the development team changed after the original run-in with Nintendo, and that's a whole other story. What makes this game such an anomaly, as well as the numerous other Mario level editors, is the fact that it's essentially just a more powerful version of Mario Maker. You'd think Nintendo would be all over this, sending that letter the first chance they got, but they haven't yet, even after the release of 2 Mario Maker games in the meantime. In reality, I guess this reinforces the remake criteria pretty literally. This game is not a remake of Mario Maker, in fact it came out before it. So even though it technically is directly competing with the game because they share what is essentially the same functionality, making and sharing levels, it doesn't exactly matter. Regardless, hopefully it never gets taken down. I should probably knock on some wood now, shouldn't I? Just like ROM hacks, fan games in general aren't targeted as often as people think. They really don't seem to go after that many in the grand scheme of things, but any within the criteria I mentioned are at much greater risk. The common misconception is that they go after everything they can find, but that's simply not true. It's not pure coincidence that they almost always exclusively stay within this specific criteria. Now, does this mean I think they should have taken down a lot of these games? Not really. There are some I agree with, but most of them it's just like, come on. You seriously thought that posed a threat against this? Sure, you could take the slippery slope approach and say that if they let one thing slide, where do they stop letting things slide? Where is the line drawn? My guess is that that's their ideology with this. Or they're just stingy old corporate men in suits that are so completely out of touch with the world that they couldn't even tell you how much a gallon of milk costs. You know, either one works.
I only drink oat milk, and it's not even because of my bowels. Now what could that be? I have no wife or kids and a lot of money. Hey, there's the cash I refused to tip the waitress earlier.
Good evening and welcome to Channel 12.5 News. I'm your host, Hank R. Mann. Let's get right into tonight's stories. In a shocking turn of events, police have reported the death of local renowned therapist Dr. Edward Chaps. Detectives found his car submerged in the Diabetes River late last night. There is visible damage to the bridge over the water where the car presumably collided, but officers are still gathering more information.
You want me to read this? Okay. At this time, we cannot disclose much as this still remains an ongoing investigation. Though I can confirm that Dr. Chaps was dead on arrival. We ask that the public remain calm as this seems to have been an accident exclusively at the driver's fault. We await autopsy. What the hell is that? Autopsy results to better understand the victim's physical and mental state at the time of the accident. Thank you. Was that good?
In other news, Darcy James, a beloved member of our field crew, was unfortunately hospitalized yesterday evening due to an injury sustained while out in the field. A shattered tailbone to be specific. That's what she gets for showing up to my pickleball game with a shirt that says, "I heart Hank's pickle and balls." Anyways, that's it for tonight, folks. From all of us here at Channel 12.5 News, thank you for watching. And as always, I'll leave you with this. We may not be the best news source, but we definitely exist. Have a good one.
Did you see that?
Let's take a familiar step away from Nintendo and look at one specific company with a drastically different approach to fan games. If you remember from when I talked about emulation, Sega is known pretty well for having an extremely relaxed attitude toward the practice, at least in comparison to other companies, and Nintendo especially. With fan games, it's largely the same story. Representatives of the company have explicitly gone on record saying that as long as you aren't profiting, feel free to do with our properties as you will. The game I'm referencing today, which is probably a familiar story to many, actually took it quite a few steps further than that. Let me explain. So, if you've known anything about Sega over the past decade and a half or so, you would be aware that they, to put it short, have made some bad games. In turn, fans got pretty tired of it and decided to pick up the slack themselves. Relevant to this situation is Sonic Mania, a game produced as a result of prominent Sonic fan game and ROM hack creators being hired by Sega to work with them on the title. This is how I imagine that hiring process went.
Hey, we kind of suck ass. Can you help us?
Sonic Mania was a sort of return to form for the Sonic series, paying homage to the original Genesis titles in both gameplay and aesthetics. Like I said, much of the team was composed of people from the fan content community, which was entirely unprecedented in the industry, and still is to this day, but this decision by Sega would definitely prove to be a good one. The lead developer of Sonic Mania, Christian Whitehead, actually worked with Sega before this when he was contracted to develop enhanced mobile ports of the Genesis Sonic games. Shortly after these ports were finished, Christian presented a playable prototype of what would become Sonic Mania to Sonic Team producer Takashi Iizuka. Development commenced shortly after this, and well, the rest is history. In August of 2017, Sonic Mania released and became the highest rated Sonic game in 15 years. Now, you could say that the hiring of these fan game creators came from a place of desperation, and in some ways it probably did. Sega missed the mark game after game for years, and at that point they could have just been extremely discouraged and willing to do anything. You definitely could take that route in this conversation. However, whether that was the case or not, I really don't think there's any shame in doing it, and most people would probably agree with me. Regardless, I think it's safe to say that Nintendo themselves are by no means in a place of desperation. Remember this big boy number? Their stuff still sells extremely well. It doesn't matter if it's horse or not, but they could still benefit greatly from taking the same approach as Sega. There is so much talent out there that isn't directly associated with an official studio, and many of them don't have the ability to do so even if they wanted to. Why let all of that go to waste? As far as I'm concerned, it should be common practice to search for talent via the fan community for every company. You're pulling from a huge pool of passion, knowledge, and drive for what you do, specifically. Nintendo. I'm not sure if your ego is too big to grasp this or something, but sometimes it doesn't have to be as simple as the by-the-books definition of copyright infringement, especially if monetization isn't involved. Why not consider using your unbelievably passionate fans to your advantage? If they're willing to dedicate hundreds or even thousands of hours of their life solely to making games based on your properties and solely out of pure love for the franchises, what kind of stuff do you think they could produce if you actually paid them for it? Isn't that at least a little bit flattering?
So loosen up and actually give these people a chance. I highly doubt you'll regret it in the long run.
Fan games aren't the only thing Nintendo has gone after in the past though. Fan-made content in general is something with a pretty rough history when it comes to this company. What do I mean by fan-made content though? Well, in this case I'm mostly referring to any form of video creation relating to Nintendo games or products, specifically on YouTube. Let's travel back to the dark year of 2015, where the Wii U was on life support and Nintendo's knowledge of how the internet worked was even worse than it is now. Ever since the rise in popularity of being a YouTuber happened a few years prior to 2015, Nintendo started cracking down on literally any content featuring their games on the platform, mostly through placing ads on these videos and then claiming all of the revenue, regardless of the subject matter. Though videos of ROM hacks and speedrunning were especially targeted and taken even further than that, with many just being taken off the platform entirely, especially if the video was monetized. Now, this all may sound absurd, but remember, we're talking about old, wrinkly, out-of-touch corporate men here. Do you really think they even understood the concept of YouTube back then, let alone now? I know this all too well. I used to work at a phone store and dealt with these elderly folks every day.
No, sir. This app came preloaded on the phone. I can't take it off. But I already have a calendar at home. I don't need this one.
All these guys saw was the use of their intellectual property on the internet, and that was enough for them. At the time, they failed to see the numerous benefits that came from users posting and sharing their content in this manner, and in some ways they still do. In addition, like I've already hinted at, monetization was also quite an issue with Nintendo content during this time. This is why you really didn't see any prominent content creators even touching Nintendo's games from around 2013 to 2015. Up until that point, this was basically the treatment that Nintendo content got. Once 2015 did hit though, something arguably even worse emerged. Say hello to the Nintendo Creators Program, or as I like to call it, corporate dystopia. This program was Nintendo's quote-unquote solution to the backlash towards their numerous takedowns and demonetizations of these videos. If you opted to sign up for this program, you were able to monetize your videos featuring Nintendo content, but there's a catch. Anyone in this program would lose 30% of their ad revenue to Nintendo on any video featuring their properties, and keep in mind that this was on top of YouTube's cut, which is usually around 45%, give or take. So basically, to put it lightly, you were getting f***ed. But that wasn't enough for Nintendo. To add even more fuel to the hate fire for them, they made it a requirement that every Nintendo video uploaded to a channel within this program had to be manually approved before being monetized. If they didn't like what you showed, did, or said in your Nintendo video, they reserved the full right to just claim the entire thing. If you didn't comply, you would be removed from the program and miss out on all that potential ad revenue, that whole 25% cut of it.
So, how many 2 liters does this get me?
Some may try to bring up the argument that a lot of the videos claimed and removed by Nintendo fell under the protection of fair use laws. However, this isn't really true. In most cases, it just comes down to saying it depends. From what I found, permission for creators to publish, say, Let's Plays for example, is often at the copyright holder's discretion. Their terms of service often expresses what type of content is permissible, and often there's even a clause that allows them to revoke permission at any time. Even if it was the case that it fell under fair use law, since the creator essentially signed an agreement with Nintendo when they were accepted into the program, they're at the mercy of the company now. How all this legal stuff actually works is beyond me, so I apologize if some of that was inaccurate. I did the best I could, but as far as I know, this is how they managed to get away with their behavior. When it comes down to it, all this does is exemplify how copyright law in general is so easily abused and manipulated by these corporations, just like with any legal matter. If they don't like it, they'll find a way to get rid of it, no matter how many loopholes they have to jump through. Unfortunately, I would be doing a disservice claiming that their takedowns and revenue snatching were unequivocally illegal. Luckily, after extreme amounts of backlash towards the program, in 2018 it was shelved and Nintendo eased off the totalitarianism quite considerably. Obviously, there's still the issues with the music that they refuse to make available anywhere, among other things, but you can now make videos about their stuff without them having an accident in their pants about it. But, you know, it's never going to be perfect. At the end of the day though, moral dilemmas and angry gamers still don't hold a candle to copyright law. No matter how stupid you think I am, I can still acknowledge that. But before you try and sit here and tell me that Nintendo is only protecting their copyrights and that they would lose them otherwise, please take another look at my example about Sega, or in numerous other places in the gaming industry. Fan game creators' intentions are very rarely, if ever, to infringe upon copyright for their own personal gain. Regardless of all of that, I still found it important to clarify that Nintendo really isn't as cutthroat as the majority makes them out to be. Just abide by the criteria I mentioned and you'll most likely be completely fine. But I still wish they weren't so hands-off with the concept as a whole. It would be amazing to one day see them embrace the talents of these fan game creators. I think it could really lead to something special. Call it a pipe dream, call me crazy, tell me I need to seek serious mental help. Whichever way you put it, you're correct.
What?
I've decided to let you go. Your mother's in the hospital.
Oh my god! Thank you! Is she okay? Sit your dumb ass back down. What? Why? I'm not letting you go. Your mom is in the hospital though. What the? Can you at least tell me if she's doing alright?
She's doing as alright as someone in critical condition in the hospital can be doing. Oh, that's a big spider.
You know what? You.
Whoa, big man! Must have forgotten I control your food supply.
Just leave me alone. I don't even care anymore.
Oh, okay. I'll respect the wishes of my
Hostage. He left it unlocked.
Chamber number 0237, housing Dr. Edward Chaps, has been deinitialized.
What the hell is this place? Coming at you live in hologram form, it's Mr. Nintendo. You may now piss your pants in disbelief. Of course it's you again. How's the shed life treating you, Dr. Chaps? I see you never took my advice and showered. Turn off my smell transmission, please.
Smell transmission disabled.
Thank you. So how you holding up, buddy? Should have just stayed in the damn shed. Anyways, welcome to my augmented reality chamber. What do you think? I think you're f***ed in the head. Everything you've known for the past several weeks, entirely fabricated. All the way down to the beads of sweat on that big-ass forehead of yours. All this over a disagreement about video games. I wasn't even doing any of the stuff you were so angry about. Ah, but that doesn't matter, does it? You were in support of my opposition. And you're a therapist. You have, how do I say it, an inherent influence on people. I couldn't have that message spreading around any more than it already is. So, we are. What is wrong with you? Great question. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? You know, my father was always a strict man. What? Throughout my entire upbringing, he preached to me the importance of copyright law. Every Sunday, we would wake up extra early to go to the copyright chapel and learn the ins and outs of the craft. And while at the time I despised the man for forcing me into this lifestyle, sometimes through physical coercion, I slowly grew to realize the value of the magnificent legislature our country had created. My father passed away when I was only 17 years old. If only he wouldn't have spent so much time studying copyright law, he might have known that you're not supposed to chew and swallow cigarettes. You light them and smoke them. He wasn't the most intelligent man, but he sure was my father. You know what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I didn't ask you to speak! Fast forward a few years, I go through law school, I get a job at Nintendo, yada yada yada, not really important. But one day, my schedule is handed to me by my secretary, as per usual. But one thing seems fishy, and I'm not talking about the tuna her dumbass spilt on it. The schedule says I have a quote-unquote meeting with Dr. Edward Chaps. Now, I have no idea who you are at this point, but I think nothing of it and attend the meeting. And that's when the pudding hit the fan. Pudding? By what I can only consider an anomaly, you somehow modified my schedule to add these meetings in. And I missed my chiropractor appointments for 3 whole weeks because of it. Even worse is that these weren't meetings, they were therapy appointments disguised as meetings, attempting to bring me out of the great ways my father taught me so long ago. And as you may know, you continuously pissed me off for 3 entire sessions, of which I kept returning to because I can't control myself when it comes to following schedules.
That is really weird.
At that point, I had finally had it. I couldn't even get my lawyers involved because you got me to sign that stupid little waiver with your sweet talk. So instead, I went home and began to devise a plan to kidnap you. And it only took me 2 hours since you thought it was a good idea to leave the back door of your office just sitting open in the middle of the night. I I threw a bag over your head, drugged you, threw you in my car, and, well, you probably remember the rest. All the way down to the last saltine. Anyways, I've been babbling for way too long. If anyone were to be, say, watching us have this conversation right now, they'd probably be pretty bored. Obviously, you've noticed that there are others in your same position. I'm giving each and every one of you an ultimatum. You either join my task force to stop emulation, fan games, and anything else I feel like purifying, or you return to your shed illusion and live off saltines for the rest of your days. Do we get any time to decide? By all means, take as much time as you need. Just keep in mind that I will not be feeding you whatsoever until you make a decision. So, tick-tock.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes? Who the hell are you?
That's not important. We're on the same side, okay? Now, we don't have much time, so listen up. I'm going to unlock the exit hatch in about 10 seconds. I don't know where it's located in the room, so you've got to find it. And fast. Mr. Nintendo is on his way back up here right now.
So you don't have any idea where it could be?
Yes, that's what I just said, dumbass. Stop asking questions and start looking. How the hell did you get out?
Oh, that sounds like a copyright lover.
Oh, God. It's been real, dude. Hatch is opening now. If you don't make it, well, I guess I'll see you on the other side.
You know too much now! It's your fault that I have to do this!
Oh, no! Oh, thank God!
Got another one. This just in, an autopsy report on the body found in the Diabetes River, presumed to be the missing Dr. Edward Chaps, turned out to be someone else entirely. Authorities are still hard at work identifying this individual. Chaps remains to be located. The Nintendo executive pinned as the prime suspect in the disappearance of Dr. Edward Chaps has been cleared of any and all charges, seemingly for no reason. He has since expressed his supposed condolences to Chaps and donated several $1 million to entirely unrelated charities.
Chaps was an amazing therapist. Helped me out of a really tough spot. That note I left his secretary was during one of my most severe episodes, and still he was understanding and worked through everything with me. It's just so sad to see that he still isn't home. I'm sorry, I can't.